Welcome back to the show, Earthlings. This is episode 3. What I'm going to talk about in this episode is a little of my experience, my story, how I came upon all of this, and why. In addition, I'm going to talk a little bit about the movie, because it is part of my introduction into Gia's life and her story. So I'll just jump right in. When I was in junior high, I was about 13, 14, I discovered this, what they called a forum. It's like Facebook today, but it was its own website, and people would just create a free account and they'd go in there and they would just post things, and then everybody would comment, and it was like one step up from a chat room. But at the time, Facebook was only open to college students. This was like 2003, 2004 when I was 13 and 14. Facebook existed, but it was only open to college students, so this was like the alternative. This was like the everyman's alternative. But anyway, I admired Angelina Jolie for her humanitarian work at the time. She was doing a lot of work with the UNHCR and refugees, and she was giving a lot of speeches on it, and I thought that this was really important, really impressive, and I wanted to do something like that. I wanted to make a difference the way she was doing. I didn't specifically want to do exactly what she was doing, but I wanted to make sure that I was aware of world events and how other people lived, and try to make a difference. But most of the people I went to school with couldn't have cared less about that kind of stuff. They would have said, "Oh yeah, that's really good, and yeah, we can give them some money, or my parents donate or whatever, and it's all well and good, just leave it at that." But for me, that wasn't enough. For me, it was not enough to just say, "Oh, I donated a can of corn or something to some homeless people." To me, that just was not enough. I wanted to do something more than that. And when I looked at someone like Angelina Jolie, I saw somebody who was actually doing more, was doing something that I wanted to do. Now, I was only 14. I couldn't really do a whole lot. But when I found this forum, this like chat room, I found people that were older than me and were equally as interested in that kind of stuff. So it was a place for me to talk this stuff out with people who were more mature, more aware than my peers. And so I really enjoyed that. That was what I was looking for. I got very frustrated with the people I went to school with, only caring about what kind of t-shirt you wore that day and what band you were listening to and whose party you were going to on the weekend. That kind of stuff didn't interest me. That was the stuff that I couldn't have cared less about. I was an odd teenager, you could say. But this forum consisted of people who were very interested in that aspect, in the humanitarian aspect, and there were also people that were interested in Angelina Jolie just as an actress, which interested me to a certain extent. I thought that she gave very powerful performances, something that stayed with you, but I was 14. I couldn't really explain that stuff very much. I found it interesting, but not as much as the humanitarian stuff. So I came across this post on this forum about this movie called Gia, and everybody was talking about it. They're like, "Oh, it's such a great movie, it's such an important story, it's so powerful, it's so moving, it's this, that, and the other thing, and you gotta see it whenever you can." And I read through the post and I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that sounds interesting, but it's not something I'm going to devote my life to, But then somebody posted on there, "Oh, it's going to be on HBO at this time," and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to be up at that time. Let me just click over to HBO and check it out. I was not ready for what I had seen. Now, mind you, I did not watch the entire movie from beginning to end. I only saw bits and pieces of it, but it was overwhelming. Way, way overwhelming for a 14-year-old. I could not handle what I had just been exposed to. So I had to turn it off. I had to walk away from it. I was like, these people may like this movie, but I cannot get into that. It was just too much. However, if you know anything about how HBO does things, they'll play a movie like 15 times in 2 weeks, and then they won't play it for like 6 months. So it was on again at another time, and I thought, well, let's try again. But the only thing I remember watching was the ending. And that was the part that actually made sense to me. The end of the movie. The very end of the movie made sense to me. Especially where they've got the quote that I read in a previous episode from the book where Gia says, I think God has a big plan for me, just not in this life. That one quote is the only thing that resonated with me from the entire movie, just to be honest. That one quote was something that I connected with, because I felt the same way about my life. Like, God has something that he wants me to do, and maybe not right now, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but there's something very important that I need to be doing. And that connected with my interest in humanitarian work and all that jazz. So that quote stuck with me. But I could not get into the rest of the movie. So I just ditched it. I just left it. I was like, okay, well, that's one movie, and I don't care to ever see that mess again. Just being honest here. And so I left it for another, 14 years, I think it was. Yeah. I was about 28 when I decided to peruse through YouTube just to see what Angelina Jolie was up to, because I kind of lost interest in everything that she was doing. I didn't lose interest in humanitarian work, obviously, in helping people. I just kind of lost interest in the way she was doing it. I just kind of outgrew it, I feel like. But by the time I was 28, I decided, let's check up and see what she's doing, because it was a good thing. I may disagree with this or that or whatever she's doing, but it's still good work. So I went to YouTube, typed in her name, found some stuff, watched a few interviews that were more recent, and I came across scenes from this movie, from this Gia movie. And I thought, oh no, absolutely not. Will not click on this. I never want to revisit that ever again for the rest of my life. That is way too much. And I didn't. Most of them I didn't. But there were a couple that I would watch like a minute or two, and I'd be like, oh, okay. And I came back to that quote again. The end. The very end of the movie. The very, very end. I came back to that. And then if you've seen it, the poetry where she's walking with a sheet wrapped around her, and there's like the poetry coming up on the screen and she's reading it, all that jazz. I watched that, and I remembered how that quote made me feel and how I connected to it. And I hadn't thought about it literally in 14 years. But I went right back to that place. It resonated with me in the exact same way it did when I was 14. And I thought, okay, there's something to this then. There's something that I just wasn't able to process when I was a teenager. But now I'm an adult, so I should be able to handle it better. And so the next memory I had was, oh yeah, those people on that forum, they talked about a book. They talked about how this movie was based on a book. And I had forgotten about that. But, now I'm 28 years old, I have a job, I have money, right? I can buy the book, and I should. And if anybody who knows me knows that I absolutely love books. There's like no form of media besides music that I love more than books. So I was like, all right, go to Amazon, let's check it out. What was that book called? I didn't even remember the title of it. I had to search around for it. And then I finally found it. I was like, oh yeah, it's called Thing of Beauty. So let's check it out. I did one of those, previews, a look inside thing. Read a few pages and I thought, okay, yeah. It's very intense. Her story is not easy to handle. But now I'm an adult, so I understand things better than I did then. And I think that I can actually get through this. So I bought the book. And boy, did it open up a different world for me. I learned so much about myself and my own life from reading this book. And I know I'm not the only one that says that. I have seen so many other people post online all over the place how their life was changed by this story, by reading this book, this, that, and the other thing. So that just tells me that it is an extremely important story. That's what they were trying to tell me back when I was 14, and I couldn't understand that. But it is an extremely important story, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman. It doesn't matter if you identify as gay or straight. It doesn't matter. None of it matters, because this is just a human story. Everybody can get something from this story. But the movie, on the other hand, not so much. I get it that a lot of people really love it, but there are also a lot of people that criticize it. And I just kind of sit in the middle because I'm grateful that it introduced me to this story. But like I've said, I'll be honest with you, I have never watched that movie from beginning to end. And I probably never will. I don't think I'll ever be able to watch that movie from beginning to end. But it's fine. It's perfectly fine. I don't think that it's absolutely necessary. Like I said, I'm not going to diss anybody who really loves it and got a lot out of it. Okay, if that works for you, I'm not going to judge that, But I do think that there's better information in the books that have been written. There's much better information in the books. It's more consistent. And it's just, you get to know her better from reading the books, I think. Not just Thing of Beauty, because it's very historical, and I appreciate that kind of thing. I appreciate Stephen Freed's writings. But if you read the other one called Born This Way, you also get another perspective, and some people like that one better. And again, it's whatever works for you. But I would say that the books are much, much better than watching the movie. That being said, I would like to actually point out something in the book Thing of Beauty. It's in the chapter titled Beautiful Friend, The End. The paperback copy I have is on page 378. It's a quote from Gia's friend Rob, who said, she knew that somebody would want to do something with her life story. She said, I don't want it on no Monday night movie, The Adventures of Karanji. She didn't want any bullshit in it. And quite frankly, I think there is a lot of bullshit in the movie. It's just funny to me how he quotes her as specifically saying she did not want some crazy, overly dramatic Monday night movie type thing made of her life. And a lot of people, I think, would agree with me that HBO movie was over the top. It was overly dramatic. They took way too much creative license. And I get it that they try to make the stuff more interesting. They try to make it work for TV. You gotta hold the audience attention. I get it that they do that. However, it's not accurate. It really isn't. And I think a lot of people would agree that there is some bullshit in it. And that's specifically what Gia said she did not want. So, take it with a grain of salt if you want. Take it however you want. But I do believe that Gia personally would rather people read the books, do some research, and if you want to watch the movie, okay, but take it with a grain of salt. Understand that not all of it is accurate. A lot of it is blown out of proportion because they wanted to make it good TV. And again, I will say that her story is for everyone. It's not for any specific group of people. And I do believe, I've said previously in another episode, that she's speaking to everyone. She reaches out to specific people for specific reasons. And she's got something she wants to say to each and every person that she reaches out to. Obviously, she reached out to me. I couldn't handle it when I was 14, but obviously it never left. I came right back to it 14 years later and could completely understand it. So I personally feel like she does want to speak to each person. Not just in general either, not just like a cautionary tale of don't do what I did, but individually, on a personal level. I get the impression that she genuinely cares about people each and every individual person. She genuinely cares about them, and she has something specific she wants to say to each person. Okay, and it is mentioned here, that same chapter, her friend Rob talks about how she wanted to make videos to get to the heart of why people do drugs and how this happens and help young kids to avoid it. And I agree. That's, obviously he knows her. I don't. But I agree that's something that she still wants to do. But even on, from my personal experience on a deeper level than that, I'm not a recovering addict. I've never done drugs. Never in my life. But yet she still reached out to me. She still had something to say to me. My life is nowhere even close to what hers was like. I've never even been to New York City. Never in my life. I've been to a lot of places. Never been to New York City. Never been to Philadelphia. Never done drugs. Never been a model. None of this stuff. None of it. My life couldn't possibly be more opposite from hers. But she still had something she wanted to say to me. And I still connected with it. I still, on a very deep level, connected with her story. So, that's all I had for this episode. Just wanted to give you a little backstory. I know a lot of people out there like to ask the question, why Gia? What was your introduction to her? Why are you interested in her? And all that jazz. So, that's my story. That's my opinion. And I thank you for listening. And I hope that you stick around for more. And that you have a wonderful day. And God bless.